There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to 2021. I don't know if it's going to be 2021 wherever you are by the time this video goes up, probably. It's been 2021 here for a long time, for several hours. It's just around noon on New Year's Day in Tokyo. So here I am. I got lots to say, so I'm not going to do much preambling, chatting. Just going to get right to the wrap up of my final week of reading. I finished 6 books, I have no bails, and I had a really great final week of reading. The first one I finished was Eudora Welty's Delta Wedding. I did this exclusively on audio. I did mine, the ebook, both of which, the audiobook and the ebook, are on Scribd, but I can't do an audio text combo. When both are on Scribd, you can't be reading and listening at the same time. So I would just go to the ebook if I kind of missed a passage, or if I just wanted to pull one out for my Sunday sentences. This is one of my books of the year. It's so close to the end of the year, and I realize now when I do my besties and worsties, I don't actually pull a top book of the year. I just have a top of the calendar year, new releases. So this is not going to be that, but it's one of the best novels I've ever read. It has a fairly low rating on Goodreads, which means I'm a lot smarter than all those other people. No, it means I think some readers don't connect with the kind of plotlessness of it, but I would argue that it's a very heavily plotted. There's a lot going on. It's really a family saga told over the course of a 4-day period when Dabney Fairchild gets married. But we get the whole family history embedded in thoughts and memories and associations, and it all unravels, and I think it's just pulsating with story. So I loved it. I just love it. The writing is just gorgeous. I will maybe do a full review. I'm tired. So I've been pumping out the year-end videos, and I've got 2 more after this to do, and I'm really looking forward to doing them. I'm not going to commit to doing a bunch of reviews, even though I want to. So I should say that it is published in 1946. It was her debut, and she was a woman writer of the American South for her day, fairly evolved on matters of race, but she also does a fabulous job of documenting the iniquities, the racial iniquities, the class iniquities, the gender iniquities in this novel, which is set in 1923. So there are offensive things going on. I was not troubled by them. I am just going to put out there that Toni Morrison loved her writing and thought she was one of the only white writers that had the courage to write about black people honestly. So I will hang my hat on that and just am not troubling myself with representations of the black characters who were the servants, basically. But what a rich portrayal of an extended Southern family and a large family. Dabney's father, Battle Fairchild, and her mother, Ellen, have I got it right? Ellen Fairchild. They had 1,000 kids, and the generation before them had 1,000 kids. So there's all these cousins and great aunts and uncles. One of the themes of the novel is how difficult individuality is in a large family setting. I didn't come from a large family, but family dynamics fascinate me, and if they fascinate you, this is probably the best novel ever written about family. I just think it's exquisite. Now, I'm a little bit hit and miss with Eudora Welty. I bailed on a novella of hers a couple of years ago, The Ponder Heart. I didn't like it, and it was actually on audio, narrated by the same narrator, and I'm glad I remembered. If you're going to do it on audio, you must get to the version that's narrated by Sally Darling. She is apparently a famous actor. I've never heard of her, but she either has innately or can produce a Southern accent, and it just makes the novel come alive. I don't think the prose needs any help, but I also think that hearing the story narrated so lushly makes things come alive in the writing and in the story that I might have just glossed over reading it textually. This is one of those times where I think, whether you do it together with the novel or alone, the audiobook experience enhances the reading of the book. Just incredible. I want to read a lot more by Eudora Welty. I have also finished Rosamund Lehman's The Echoing Grove, and this was also an excellent novel, a 5-star read. I'm not as exuberant about it as I was just now about the Eudora Welty, but this was a stunning novel and I loved it. It is really talky, so if it even started to bother me a little bit, not enough to knock off a star, but the story is almost exclusively told in 20-page conversations. And those conversations are fascinating, but there isn't a lot of action in the novel. There's an opening scene where the two sisters who had been estranged come back together. I am going to do a full review of this one because I want to think about this one. I want to do some research on Lehman herself and on what others make of the point of view, because point of view here is really fascinating and confusing. But in a nutshell, I'm not going to give the big thing away. It's a story about sisters that are rivals for one man, and that's all I'm going to say. I think you could probably find reviews that would say much more, but I think you should discover it for yourself because it's really quite shocking and dramatic, and I was just fascinated from the start to finish. Her prose is also fascinating, but not trippingly, doesn't roll trippingly off the tongue. Whatever tongue I'm got inside when I'm reading to myself silently. It's a little bit too Jamesian for me, but no, I loved it. I'm going to read much more Rosamund Lehman, and this was a great place to start. And yesterday I finally finished Sedilla by Adam Mars Jones, which is volume 2 of the John Cromer series. Apparently there is going to be a third. It's a projected trilogy, but it's kind of like Adam Mars Jones is the new Hilary Mantel, so it's been maybe close to a decade since Sedilla came out. I'm not sure if we'll ever see the third and final in the series, but that's okay. So this is, I started this about 3 months ago, maybe more, maybe 4 months ago. It is a gay novel about a fascinating young gay British man who I can't remember, because the first in the series, Pilcrow, I read about 5 or 6 years ago. So I can't remember if John was born with this or developed it as a young child. One or the other. Still's disease, which affected him very severely and made him very disabled. He spent most of his childhood in a hospital bedridden and eventually developed enough use of his legs that he could use a wheelchair. That's all in Pilcrow, and Sedilla picks up with him when he's a high school student and preparing to enter university, and following him through to the end of his university degree at Cambridge. And this part of the story is set in the late 60s and 70s. I'm going to do a review of both of them, so I won't say more than that. It was, what did I give it? I think I gave it 4 stars because it was 500 pages. I think it probably could have been 300, but I felt very similarly about Pilcrow at the time, and then that book stuck with me. Pilcrow, I bet you Sedilla is also going to stick with me like that, and I may go back and up it to 5 stars because it really was engrossing in a campy, meditative way. Very unique voice, very unique story, very unique protagonist. Highly recommended. I'm going to try to put some thoughts together to do a review of both novels. And I have finished this German novel, The Cold Center by Inka Pare. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Translated from the German by Katie Derbyshire. I really liked it. I almost loved it. I gave it 4 stars, but what a compelling novel. It's almost thriller-esque in a way that really worked for me. I knocked a star off because I didn't feel the characters leapt off the page, and if they had, it would have been a 5-star read, but it was fascinating. The main characters are a divorced couple that are amicably divorced that lived in East Germany and moved to West Germany just before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and set closer to the year 2000 when the ex-wife has cancer and contacts her ex-husband. Out of the blue, they hadn't kept in a lot of contact. They had been friendly but not close after the divorce. And she has cancer and she needs him to go on this quest to find out stuff from their past, from even before they were a couple, to do with a workplace, which is the cold center, the cooling department of a newspaper. back in the day before the fall of the Berlin Wall. And so there's all this stuff about East Germany, West Germany, the workplace, and this mystery of what Poirot is really good at withholding information that keeps you turning the pages. Like, what does he want her to do? Why? And how ominous is this scene supposed to be? And like, I almost want to, I think I will eventually reread it, because the structure and the way that she tantalized me by withholding information and jumping around temporally and otherwise in the story. It was very satisfying, and if the characters had breathed a bit more, I would have actually loved it. But as it stands, I really liked it, and you should check it out. I will read more by Inka Puré. And so this is the final book in my Read More German Books 2020 challenge, and I didn't get to everything on my TBR, so I'm going to keep it going for 2021. And I finished the last two books of 2020 on the morning of January 1st, 2021. I don't care. They're going into my 2020 folder because I needed to do the last dozen or so pages on each. So one of them was We the Animals by Justin Torres, a gay American writer of Puerto Rican descent. And this is his debut, and I loved it. 5 stars. I am going to try to do a review. I have to think about it. Even though it was 150 pages, I did read it more quickly than I usually like to read stuff, so it might even be a book that I reread before I review it. It was excellent. I thought the ending was a little bit, but endings are the least important part of novels for me, so I didn't knock a star off, but the ending, I think, could have been better. But up until the ending, which was a little bit jarring, but still fascinating, it was so incredibly vibrant, and each chapter of the novel almost read like a short story. It had a self-contained quality, but there was a narrative, and I wouldn't say it's a short story cycle, not at all. Told through the eyes of the youngest of 3 brothers in this Puerto Rican American family. The mother was not Puerto Rican, the father was, and they lived in maybe Brooklyn. Abusive father, but a loving father, abusive father. Like, I mean, everything was, there was no black or white with anybody. It was all gray in a way that was just fascinating to read. And there was something about the way that the scenes unfolded, the way that the action progressed, that it wasn't quite realistic. There was something else going on. I don't mean magical realism, no, but something that made everything kind of vibrate in a different way. I think it's all he's ever written. When was it published? 2011. So yeah, I hope we hear more from Justin Torres, because I was really, really impressed. And finally, my last book of 2020, which I finished on New Year's Day the following year, but who's counting, was Older Brother by Mahir Guvin, translated from French by Tina Cover. I loved it. It's a debut. Probably if it hadn't been a debut, it might have been a 4-star, but as a debut, it's really stunning. Expertly translated. The prose was lush, and Tina Cover had to make some fascinating choices about what to translate, what to leave in French, and how to render Franco-Syrian dialect into English. My friend Lindy read it at the same time as me, but I think she's not finished yet, but she's reading in French. Show off! She can read French. And it's about an older brother and a younger brother, a Franco-Syrian family. I'm not going to try to review it. This is an example of a book that ended so ingeniously that it would have been a 4-star read except for the ending, because there was something about the way the younger brother, the one who went to Syria, left France, because the brothers, they were born and grew up in France, and the younger one, who was a nurse, went to Syria for humanitarian work, or so that's what he said. And that's one of the things about the story, that everybody is guessing and wondering what the truth is at all times about all the characters. With all the doubting, doubt is a word that's used a lot in the novel, especially near the end. It's told in the voices of the older brother who stayed in France and the younger brother who went to Syria. That's all I'm going to say that's all you're going to get from me about the plot. But the word doubt keeps coming up, and it has to do with the younger brother and how much the older brother can believe what he's saying. And I didn't feel that the younger brother's character, or what befell him, what he actually did, or what was done to him, satisfyingly explained where the ending was going, and then I got to the ending and it's like, oh wow, no, Mahir Guven was in control of this story for the whole time and brought it to this incredible conclusion. So yeah, I loved it. And I can't expect those of you that know Tina Cover is becoming a good friend of mine to take my word for it, but you should. It's wonderful. Read it. So that was my 2020 reading year. Pretty good, hey? Woo! So if you didn't see, I had a Zoom chat with Tina Cover, Britta Bowler, and Lindy Pratch, 3 of my BookTube besties, and we talked about year-end reading stuff and beginning of the year reading stuff, habits, wrap-ups, goals, resolutions, all that stuff. That video went up late last night, and if you watch it all the way to the end, people, there's a very special cameo, and I bet you that most people who watched... I'm just getting a tweet from Lindy as we speak, telling me how much she loved We the Animals by Justin Torres. So there you go. And Lindy, you made me forget what I was talking about. Because this cameo appears after I've started to thank my guests, I bet you 95% of people that actually watched the video until that point would have turned it off, because that's what we do, right? As soon as we hear the video host starting to sign off, just skip, right? So you might want to go back and check that cameo out. That was a delightful video to do. I had some problems with the editing with my iMovie software. It kept me up till 2 a.m., but all's well that ends well. So, in that video, I talked about New Year's resolutions for my reading year ahead, and I will talk about them extremely briefly. Check out the other video if you want more details. One is that I am planning to actually read the synopsis, maybe read a review or two of each book that I buy or consider reading, even from my own library, before deciding whether to try it or not. I am adverse to doing it. I like to go into a book blind, but I end up starting a lot of books that if I just bothered to read this plot synopsis, I would have known that there was a ghost in it, or it was an extended dream sequence, or it was kind of sci-fi literary fiction or something, and I would have not even bothered. So I'm just going to start doing that. And I'm not committing to staying with it for the whole year, but I'm going to start out and see how it goes, because... I don't care how much money I waste on books that I start and bail on, because I usually give it to one of you or take it to the used bookstore. I'm not fussed about it, but I also think that it wouldn't kill me to do a little bit of groundwork before starting the book. So that's one. And the second one is that I'm going to pare down how many books I read concurrently in 2021, and that I'm going to stick to. I have some leeway. I've got some wiggle room. For most of 2020, I was reading a minimum of 12 books concurrently, often closer to 20, and that's too much for me, I have decided. 12 might be my sweet spot if I stuck to it, but as an experiment, in 2021, I'm going to pare it way down to no more than 6 books concurrently, and that will start as of today. That includes buddy reads, except that I am going to carve out an exception for buddy reads where I'm doing a short story collection or something like that, where I'm only reading a chapter a week and checking in once a week with my buddy reader. I can deal with a few of those outside of my 6-book maximum. So that's okay. And I'm also going to make an exception for audiobooks, because I'm usually listening to them at a time when I wouldn't be able to read a physical book, like when I'm walking or something. So that's fine. So those are my 2 New Year's resolutions. So let's see how I go. I just don't like losing track of a book when I don't, because I've got buddy reads or I've got something where I have to put on one of my many books aside for more than a week. I think I can put a book down for a week and still keep the flow of it, but anything much more than that, and it's almost impossible to sort of keep going with it. So if I keep it down to 6 books, that probably means that I will dip into every book at least every other day, and maybe even more than that. On days when I'm not so busy, I could dip into each book every day. So let's see how that goes, shall we? I'm really excited, actually. So with those out of the way, I have one more thing that's not a New Year's resolution that I have to say. I am participating in Invisible Cities. And that is going to shape my reading in 2021 to a significant degree. Invisible Cities is a year-long reading project, and it is hosted by, goodness, how many? I think maybe 7 hosts. I don't know a lot of them. I will just mention their names and put the links below. I think some of them are book bloggers, not on YouTube. But they are Michael Kitto of Knowledge Lost. I don't know the channel names for everybody. Yamini, Stephanie, Agnes. She has a very famous, fabulous book blog, Beyond Epilogue. Natalie, Nicole, that's Nicole is Here to Learn, and Will. I'll put the links to their stuff and you can learn more about Invisible Cities. But basically what it is they are going to tell us 3 countries every month that we, if we want, to the degree to which we want to participate, that we should read books from that particular month. It sounds fun, and it's a good way for me to just pull books off my shelf or off script that I might not get to otherwise, so I'm game. I'm not necessarily going to read books from every country every month, but I'm going to start out that way and see how it goes, especially if I have books on my shelf that, have been sitting there for a while, that this is a good chance to, okay, it's time. So that is going to show up in my first little weekly TBR here, which is what I have left to tell you about. So it's time to start my weekly TBR now. Not that I'm planning to finish any of these in the coming week, but just here's what I'm going to start this week. Let me begin with buddy reads. I'm going to be starting 3 collections of short stories. So these don't count in my 6 because they're going to be once a week check-ins. So these are some exceptions to the 6-book rule. One is Inheritors by Asako Serizawa. And it's written in English. Serizawa is a Japanese writer living in America, and she has written these stories. I think it's almost like a short story cycle. It spanned a century and a half with the same family, I believe. And I'm going to start that buddy read this weekend. I think my first check-in with... Did I say it's a buddy read with Britta Bowler? I didn't say. This is a buddy read with Britta Bowler, and our first check-in will be tomorrow on the first story. And this one made Steve Donohue's worst books of 2020 list. Daddy, a short story collection by Emma Cline. And I heard very mixed reviews of her novel, The Girls, and I was never interested in that. But on a buddy read last year with Heidi of My Reading Life, with whom I'm buddy reading this collection, we read one story in another anthology. I think it was maybe Best American Short Stories, I can't remember. And I really loved the story. We both did. That's why we're going to start buddy reading it this week. Our first check-in on the first story is on Monday, and I'm sure Steve will deal with it. And the last of the short story exemptions from my 6-book rule buddy read is Runaway by Alice Munro, and this will be a buddy read with Kendra Winchester. We buddy read another collection of Alice Munro. Was it last year? The year before? When was this collection published? 2004, so it's not that new. First check-in is on Sunday. Love me some Alice. All right, those are the exemptions. I have an audiobook exemption. In fact, I should mention the audiobook exemption because otherwise I'm liable to forget. So the final exemption from the 6-book rule. Is this 6-book rule starting to seem completely ridiculous to you? It's not ridiculous to me, actually, but when I start the year out and I haven't even gotten to any of the 6 books yet, I'm feeling a little self-conscious. And that is Volume 2 of Clarissa, the 1758 whopper of a novel by Samuel Richardson. It took me the better part of a year, maybe even more than a year, to do Volume 1 on audio. It was 34 hours. Volume 1 of 3 was 34 hours. I have taken a 3 or 4 month break. I am champing at the bit to start Volume 2, probably today on the exercise bike. And it also is 34 hours. So at this rate, I won't finish the novel for at least, another year, maybe more. But really loved it. Volume 1, eager to continue. All right, now on to the 6 books. This is not a once-a-week check-in, so this buddy read, which I'm really excited about, is part of the 6 books. Firdaus Kanga's Trying to Grow, a 1990 novel by Firdaus Kanga, who is a gay Parsi writer from Bombay, and this is his debut novel, very autobiographical, about living with brittle bone disease. I talk about this quite a bit in the video. This Friday Reads is going long, so I'm not going to say much about it. This is a buddy read with Jyotsna of Jyotsna's Bookscapades, and I am so excited to read it. There's a movie that I saw and loved called Sixth Happiness, and now I'm finally going to read the novel. And when I got my used copy, it's out of print, in the mail from some seller, it found out that I lucked out and got a signed copy. At this point, I'm going to tell you the three countries for January for the Invisible Cities project are Japan, Morocco, and Argentina. This week, I'm going to start the Japanese one, and then maybe next week start the books that I've chosen for the other two countries. So I've already shown you the short story collection, which I'm definitely not going to finish in January. But I'm going to start this novel, which I hope is much better than its cover. The Twilight Years by Sawako Ariyoshi, translated from the Japanese by Mildred Tahara. I believe the original was published in 1972 and the translation in 1984. And this is one of those print-on-demand glossy things. I found out about this book from Ronan Hession, and I ordered it, and he and I commiserated on what a butt-ugly book it is. He said it was as aesthetically pleasing as a Department of Transportation annual report from 1972. Yeah, it's just ugly, but he really liked the novel. And it is about a Japanese woman who has to take care of her really awful, grouchy, terrible father-in-law when he gets too old to take care of himself. That sounds good to me. We all know that Sean the Book Maniac is of the opinion that men don't write very well, so I do need to keep testing that theory. You know, there's a few good ones. I can think of maybe one, and let's see if this is another. Gerald Murnane's Tamarisk Row. He is an Australian writer, and this is a reprint of a very, very early novel. First published 1974, and this is a very attractive reprint. I've never read anything by him. Want to give it a try. It's an evocation of a Catholic childhood in Australia in the late 1940s. We'll see what it's all about. One of my favorite writers is the Canadian writer Helen Humphreys, and this is her most recent novel. I showed this in the year-end video last night, Rabbit Foot Bill. Set in small-town Saskatchewan and has centers on a violent crime. No, it's not a mystery. It's based on a true crime story, and that's all I know about it. Helen Humphreys is usually a hit for me. I've had one serious miss with her, which was her last novel, so I hope this one will keep going with the hits. And can I pronounce this? I've never checked. I think I can just pronounce it phonetically, and it should be okay. Judith Hennigan's Snegorochka, which I found out about on Eric Carl Anderson's channel many months ago, promptly ordered and kind of forgot about it on my shelf, so it's time to get to it. It is set in Kiev, Ukraine in 1992, about a married couple. The husband is a journalist, and it's his first foreign posting, and that's all I know about it. I have now read the back cover. There's no ghosts, there's no magical realism. Should be okay, I hope so. Well, here I am several hours later. I'm just about finished editing this sucker and realized I hadn't talked about 6 books. I left one out, so here it is. This is a work of anti-colonial history, Canadian history, Indigenous history, called Liberalism. The title is not promising. I don't know if the book is going to be for me, but I want to try it. Liberalism, Surveillance, and Resistance. The subtitle grabs me a lot more than that. Indigenous Communities in Western Canada, 1877 to 1927, by Keith D. Smith. Smith is the chair of, was the chair of the Department of First Nations Studies at Vancouver Island University in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Never heard of that university, so I don't know. I'm going to try it. It's on Scribd. I want to continuously be reading Indigenous history and other Indigenous nonfiction works throughout 2021. In fact, maybe I should have said that is one of my reading goals as well. I just plan to continuously read because I am so ignorant and I want to rectify that. So it might be a little bit too academic for me, but I want the history that it's focused on, which is between those dates, the expansion of settlers into First Nations territory in southern Alberta and British Columbia. And I don't know anything about Indigenous history or really any history of those parts of Canada. So when I saw it on Scribd, I thought, I'm going to read that one next. If it doesn't work out, I've got a TBR for Indigenous history and politics in Canada as long as my arm. All right, so I have exciting things right out of the gate in 2021. I hope you do too. Thanks for watching.